What if Darth Vader found Luke on Tatooine? During the era of the Empire, Vader believed his children died with Padme and that he was sentenced to a life alone. But in fact, his son Luke was alive and well and was raised on the planet Tatooine. So what if Vader found Luke on his home planet shortly after Revenge of the Sith? How would things change if Vader knew he had a son almost right from the beginning? Well, that's what we're going to find out, so sit back, get some popcorn, and let's get into it. Our story begins 3 years after the events of Revenge of the Sith, as Vader sits in his castle on Mustafar. He had adjusted to life as the lead enforcer of the Empire, but Vader couldn't help but feel like something was missing. He remembered back to his life with Padme. Ever since he was a little boy, all he dreamt about was having a life with her and their kids. But now he couldn't. Now she was gone and she'd never come back. As Vader focused his mind on this thought, his rage began to boil. He thought back to why he was like this. Obi-Wan. It was all Obi-Wan's fault. He was always jealous of his power, how easily the Force came to him. He wanted to weaken his power, to take everything from him. Vader began to shake as the Force took over, and the walls around him shook as his hatred caused the Force to rumble the castle. Before Vader knew what was happening, he was thrust into a vision. All he saw were fragments. He saw Tatooine, Mos Eisley, and the sandy dunes across the wastelands. As he tried to piece it together, he heard a voice in the distance. He couldn't make it out at first, but then realized he was saying a name. It came closer before Vader heard it instantly. Kenobi. He was there, alive. Vader practically exploded in rage. For 3 years now, Vader had been hunting Kenobi to get revenge for what he did to him on Mustafar. He had scoured the galaxy for him, but Obi-Wan wasn't far. He went to the one place he knew Vader wouldn't search from his own choice, Tatooine. The Dark Lord left at once, taking his TIE fighter advanced and hitting hyperspace. Hours passed and Vader entered the Tatoo system and landed his ship in the center of Mos Eisley. Vader exited as every head in the small town remains fixed on him. He goes through every shop, stall and cantina and terrorizes everyone, demanding to know where Obi-Wan Kenobi is. But everyone remained quiet. They were all terrified. Here was a man who was relatively unknown to them and had only heard through stories of the man in black who was the Emperor's personal enforcer. He marched through the town to horror-stricken faces. Vader's head stopped as he saw a man in the distance who looked familiar. A bald woman wearing a high-collared grey robe, but the chaos in the crowd caused Vader to ignore it. When Vader didn't receive any answers, he walked into the center of the town square and used the Force to rip a woman away from her 2 young infant children and hung her in the air with the Force. Everyone gasped in shock and fear as the woman began clasping her throat, begging for air. But Vader wouldn't give her any. He asked again as he spun in a full circle, ordering for the whereabouts of Obi-Wan Kenobi. Just before she dies, a man steps forward. He says he doesn't know anyone called Obi-Wan Kenobi, but says there's a Ben Kenobi who lives on the outskirts of Mos Eisley. Vader releases the woman, and as she runs back towards her children, the Dark Lord throws his ignited red lightsaber and stabs her in the back. She collapses and dies. As he walks out through the mob and to his TIE fighter, he says that's for not answering him the first time. Vader leaves everyone in horror. He gets in his TIE fighter and first travels to the Lars homestead, knowing it's on the outskirts of Mos Eisley. As he arrives, Owen and Beru run screaming to get Luke to safety. They know exactly who this was. Owen grabs a blaster to fire upon Vader, but the fallen Chosen One doesn't even ignite his saber, and instead uses the Force to crush Owen's windpipe and toss him lifelessly to the sandy floor. Beru screams in horror as she witnesses her husband mercilessly killed. Luke clung in her arms crying, the 3-year-old not understanding the world. She begs for mercy, but Vader could offer none. He ignites his saber and points it at Luke's chest, demanding for Kenobi's location or the boy dies. Beru tells him where Obi-Wan's hut is before Vader decapitates her. That was mercy to him, a quick death as he recalled her hospitality before the Clone Wars. As Vader turns to leave, he sees the bald woman far in the distance, only able to see there's an actual person through the strong capability of his mask. As Vader goes to walk towards them, his senses in the Force spike. It was familiar, almost like his own. He ignores the woman in the distance and turns back to the child. He asks the boy what his name is, to which the 3-year-old replied, Luke Skywalker. Vader's heart froze. Skywalker? He thought to himself, no, that's impossible. This boy couldn't be his son. His son died 3 years ago along with Padme. How is this even possible? Vader uses the Force to search inside the boy and he immediately feels his presence. It was true. This was his son. He brings him to his ship as he leaves for Kenobi's hut, arriving only minutes later to find the broken man sitting outside his home. Vader approaches and Kenobi's heart sinks. Requiring confirmation, he asked the Master Man who he was, but Vader replied that he already knew. This wasn't possible, Obi-Wan thought to himself. He watched Anakin die on Mustafar. He watched the lava take over. How was this even possible? Vader announces that he found his son, that he won't remain hidden any longer and will grow powerful in the Force, just as Padme would have wanted. Obi-Wan couldn't believe what he was hearing. He stands and ignites his blue lightsaber, telling Anakin he would rather die than let Luke grow up under Vader's wrath. The Sith ignites his weapon and the two fight. Vader swings with a fury he'd never felt before. 3 years into being Vader, his indignation and fury were at its highest. The memories of Mustafar still etched in his mind as he swung at the man who took everything from him. Obi-Wan assumed a defensive position, but for him, he hadn't ignited his blade since the fall of the Republic. He was rusty and with no practice. But Vader, well, he'd been fighting surviving Jedi all this time. There was a serious disadvantage. Kenobi tried everything he could, but Vader was simply too powerful. Obi-Wan resorted to trying to push Vader across the sand, but it simply didn't work, and Vader increased his strength and was able to cut through Obi-Wan's chest before slicing into his leg, and finally, he slashed him across the heart as his old master fell to the floor and died. As Vader stared at Kenobi's corpse, little Luke ran from the TIE fighter and stopped beside Vader, asking what this man did. Vader placed a hand on his little head and told Luke to remember what he was about to say. Love makes you weak, and if you are weak, you can never be powerful. Luke looks up and asks the masked man how to become powerful. Vader smiles beneath his mask, and he makes a pincer motion with his fingers. The small Luke grabs his throat as he struggles to breathe. Vader finally speaks, but he only says one word: pain. 15 years later, and Luke Skywalker is now 18 years old. Ever since Tatooine, Vader has trained Luke to become one of the most ferocious Sith the galaxy has ever seen. He first brought the young boy back to his castle on Mustafar, where he'd primarily remained during his childhood. It didn't take long for the Dark Lord to corrupt the boy's mind and have him fully embellished in the dark side. Vader began Luke's training the only conceivable way he could, through fear, control, and most of all, pain. He made Luke fight droids far too strong for his age, and when he inevitably lost, he would punish him by breaking his ribs with the Force and make him start again. When Luke failed, Vader showed him why, but when Luke succeeded, Vader took it away and demanded more. As the training continued, Vader would tell Luke about his mother and about the Jedi. Luke was instructed that the Jedi were responsible for his mother's death, and so Luke grew up with one and only thing in his mind: to hate the Jedi. When Luke was 12 and proficient in the Force, Vader brought him a Jedi he captured in the Outer Rim and forced Luke to fight him, to take his weapon and make it his own. When Luke asked why Vader couldn't just give him a saber of his own, Vader told his son that the weapon of a Sith isn't given, it's taken. And so, Luke used his powerful gifts in the Force to fight this Jedi and quickly dismantle and kill him. He then used the Force to open the lightsaber and retrieve its green kyber crystal. What followed was the bleeding process, where Luke poured all of his hatred into the crystal. He primarily focused on the physical pain and torment Vader had put him through, but also imagined the Jedi killing his mother and ruining his father's life. In almost record time, the crystal cracked, and its emerald shine was replaced by a luminous crimson glow. Vader was proud of his son, and his version of love had become so sadistic that he truly believed raising his child to be the most powerful being in the galaxy was the highest version of love he could give. Through Luke, Vader found purpose again, and he wouldn't let anyone take that away. As for Vader's master Sidious, he was never told of Vader's discovery. The Emperor remained in the dark about Vader training an apprentice for over a decade, and the fallen Chosen One knew he just had to bide his time until his son was ready before they could move against the Emperor. When Luke turned 16, he was finally allowed off Mustafar and to join him in certain missions where he hunted down either surviving Jedi or small rebel cells. On one mission, Vader and Luke intercept 2 rebel cruisers landing aboard one. The crew from the other rebel cruiser listen in horror over a comlink in the bridge as they hear blaster fire and lightsabers ring out. Very soon, they hear the doors to the bridge open and the rebels listen as their friends cry out in pain and fear, being murdered callously. They ask the pit crew what's going on. In moments, the fighting came to a stop, and all they could hear was the dark, demonic sound of a respirator. Vader picks up the comlink and tells them their friends are dead, and soon they will be too. Vader and Luke quickly travel from one ship to another, and within minutes, everyone aboard is dead. This was great training for Luke. By the time he was 18, he was extremely powerful in the Force, and Vader knew he'd trained an exceptionally powerful Sith Lord. There was no one to rival him, and he even believed that he could take on Sidious. The time was nearing. On the way home from one mission together, Vader is contacted by Tarkin, instructing him to go to Mount Tantis, where a rogue Jedi has broken into the facility. Vader practically hummed in anticipation as he and Luke entered hyperspace and used top secret Imperial codes from Imperial Station 003 to get into the planet and land their shuttle. Vader believed this would be a good training exercise for Luke. They marched through the abandoned halls of the facility together. Vader marveled at what he saw. He'd never been this deep in the facility before, and just for a little bit, he was amazed. He saw rows of Bacta tanks full of various Jedi he'd killed since becoming Vader. He saw Eth Koth, Jocasta Nu, and Vader's personal favorite, Kirek and Felia. The Sith duo continued deeper into the facility, and very quickly, Vader's amusement turned into confusion, and then a little bit of anger. He saw experiments and tubes full of attempted clone versions of Emperor Palpatine. The Dark Lord knew instantly what this had meant. Palpatine was trying to clone himself and trying to reach immortality. But the Emperor had never told him this. He kept it a secret. Once again, Vader was left in the dark and felt like his master never trusted him. Vader's rage only increased. They continued. To Vader's surprise, he couldn't sense a Jedi anywhere near, only the powerful Force signatures of Luke and himself. As they reached what felt like the basement of the facility, they opened an encoded door with the Force, and what Vader saw inside made him swell up in the most vicious form of acrimony he'd ever felt. Padme. She was in the room. There were dozens of lined tubes of Bacta containing various forms of his dead wife. He saw some when she was still young and the Queen of Naboo, but also several containers of when she was a senator during the Clone Wars. Vader was disgusted, and the Force exploded around him as he let out one of the most powerful Force screams he'd ever conjured. He fell to his knees and looked up in horror when Vader collapses to the floor in pain. Who was that, he thought to himself. He turns around to see his son with electrical fingertips. What? No, he thought to himself. That can't have been Luke. First of all, there's no way Luke would betray him, but secondly, Vader never taught him lightning. That was probably the only ability he couldn't teach his son since he'd never learned it himself. How was this even possible? As Vader tried to put the pieces together, he heard the distant sound of laughter and footsteps, which grew louder with each step. Vader knew who that was. It was his master, Darth Sidious. Palpatine appears and says, "Good work, my apprentice." Vader looked back and forth between Palpatine and Luke. Apprentice? No, that's impossible. Palpatine continues to laugh as he tells Vader a story. He explains that all those years ago when he traveled to Tatooine to find Obi-Wan Kenobi, one of Palpatine's personal informants was already on the planet, Sly Moore. Vader's memories immediately flash before his eyes as he recalled seeing a bald woman wearing a high-collared robe. It was her. Palpatine cackles as he continues, explaining that whenever Vader was away on a mission, he would travel to his castle on Mustafar and meet with young Luke, and over time they developed a connection. Vader couldn't believe what he was hearing. Not only had Palpatine been able to turn Anakin to the dark side, but he got through to his son as well. It was manipulation. For the first time in his life, Vader realized that Palpatine was nothing but a cruel man who took everything from him. His entire life flashed in memories, and at every turn, Palpatine was the one to blame for everything, including Padme's death. Palpatine says he helped Luke realize the truth and promised him that together they could bring back his mother. That explained all of the tanks of Padme, Vader thought to himself. Palpatine steps forward and begins blasting Vader with torrents of Force lightning, which seared into Vader's suit and caused incalculable pain. Vader groaned in agony as he collapsed and his vision began to darken. He called out to his son through the pain, begging for his help to come back and help him. As Luke watched, he initially disregarded his father's comments, but then Vader turned to him and told him to look around, that these tanks weren't his mother, that his mother is dead and there's nothing that can change that. These beings may look like her, but the true Padme Amidala came from within, not some physical vanity. Luke began shaking his head, looking between Vader and Palpatine. Then Vader told him the truth. He said that Palpatine is the reason his mother died, not the Jedi. It was Palpatine who manipulated and orchestrated each event so that he could assume control of the galaxy. He didn't care what happened to her. It was all his fault. Luke finally snapped, and as Palpatine remained almost in a trance, as he blasted Vader with lightning, Luke ignited his red lightsaber and stabbed Palpatine through the chest. The Dark Emperor fell to the floor, and when he did, he took his final breath. Vader breathed heavily. It was over. Luke ran to his father's side and asked if he was okay. Vader told Luke to bring him to the medical bay in the facility. This wasn't difficult to find, and when he did, medical droids worked on Vader for hours and were able to repair the damaged circuits in him from the lightning. And so, Darth Vader lived. With Palpatine dead, Vader and Luke traveled to Coruscant where they took control of the throne and announced to the galaxy that they would rule together as co-emperors. With Luke and Vader in control, the rebellion would be quickly crushed with both of them on the front lines fighting. The rebellion movement came to a complete halt after Leia Organa was publicly executed on Coruscant for treason. No one dared to oppose the two Sith Lords. They were the most powerful beings in the galaxy, and they would rule for centuries with an iron fist. Luke would eventually have children of his own, whom he forged into powerful Sith Lords, and with that, the rule of two was abolished and the new Sith Empire was created, where hundreds of Sith Lords would be trained and would rule over the galaxy. Each planet had a Sith regional governor. The galaxy was sentenced to an eternity of punishment. The Skywalkers, the most powerful bloodline to ever exist. There was nothing that could stop them. They were immortal. Thanks for watching everyone. For the entire month at Fantasy Sabers, we're giving away our new The Count Deluxe Saber for free with every order over $299 USD. Otherwise, check out our wide range of replica sabers with premium build quality and a wide range of sound fonts and effects. Don't miss out, and I'll see you all next time.